The dust swirled in lazy devils across Main Street as Eliza Whitmore stepped down from the stagecoach, her traveling dress already coated in the fine red powder that seemed to permeate everything in this forsaken corner of Arizona territory. At 19, she possessed the kind of beauty that drew unwanted attention in a frontier town: golden hair that caught the desert sun, eyes the color of prairie sky, and a grace that seemed wholly out of place among the rough-hewn buildings and rougher men of Cedar Ridge. The year was 1889, and the town squatted like a sun-baked lizard at the base of the Superstition Mountains, its wooden buildings bleached pale by the relentless sun. Saloons outnumbered churches 3-1, and the air rang with the sounds of hammering from the blacksmith, the creak of wagon wheels, and the occasional burst of raucous laughter from behind bat-wing doors. Miss Whitmore. The voice belonged to Josiah Harrington, a corpulent man whose fine clothes couldn't disguise the predatory gleam in his small, dark eyes. He was 50 if he was a day, with graying whiskers and hands that reminded Eliza of pale, grasping spiders. "Your father said you'd be arriving today." Eliza forced herself to curtsy, though every fiber of her being recoiled from the man who would be her husband in less than a fortnight. "Mr. Harrington, come now," he said, reaching for her elbow with presumptuous familiarity. "Soon you'll be calling me Josiah, or perhaps something more intimate." She stepped away, pretending to adjust her bonnet. "Where's my father?" "Attending to business at the bank. He owes me, that is, we have financial matters to discuss." Harrington's smile revealed tobacco-stained teeth. "But don't trouble your pretty head about such things. You'll have enough to occupy you. Learning to run my household." The boarding house where her father had taken rooms sat at the edge of town, where civilization gave way to the wild expanse of desert and mountain. From her window, Eliza could see the purple shadows of evening creeping across the landscape, could smell the sage and creosote on the wind. Somewhere out there, coyotes began their nightly chorus, and she pressed her palm against the glass, wishing she could dissolve into that vastness. "You'll marry him and be grateful for it." Samuel Whitmore declared that night over a meager supper of beans and cornbread. Her father had aged poorly in the 2 years since her mother's death, his once proud bearing crushed by debt and whiskey. "Harrington's willing to forgive what I owe him in exchange for your hand. It's more than generous." "Generous?" Eliza's voice rose despite herself. "He's buying me like cattle at auction." The slap came swift and sharp, leaving her cheek burning. "You'll guard your tongue, girl. We're not in Boston society anymore. Out here, a woman does what she must to survive. And what of love? What of choice?" Samuel laughed bitterly. "Love? Choice? Those are luxuries we can't afford. You think your mother married me for love? She married me because I could provide, and you'll do the same." That night, Eliza lay awake listening to the town settling into its restless slumber. Through thin walls came the tinny piano music from the Lucky Strike Saloon, punctuated by occasional gunshots that no one seemed to investigate. The desert wind rattled her window, carrying with it the scent of approaching storm. She thought of Harrington's hands, of the house she'd be expected to keep, of the years stretching ahead like prison bars. In Boston, she'd dreamed of adventure, of wide-open spaces and freedom. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd found the wide-open spaces, but less freedom than ever. The next morning brought a commotion to Main Street. A group of Apache prisoners, mostly women and children, were being marched through town under military guard. The townspeople gathered to stare and spit, shouting curses and threats. Eliza watched from the boarding house porch, her stomach turning at the hatred in their neighbors' faces. "Savages, Mrs. Brewster," the boarding house proprietress muttered beside her. "Should have killed them all years ago instead of trying to civilize them." One of the Apache women stumbled, and a soldier prodded her roughly with his rifle butt. Her child, no more than 5 or 6, began to cry, without thinking. Eliza stepped forward, but her father's hand caught her arm. "Don't even think about it," he hissed. "You want to be branded an Indian lover? That's worse than being a fallen woman in these parts." The procession moved on. leaving dust and bitter taste in Eliza's mouth. That afternoon, while her father conducted business, she explored the town, seeking any avenue of escape. The stage wouldn't come through again for a week, and she had no money for passage anyway. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and terrifying in its vastness. As evening approached, storm clouds gathered over the mountains, turning the sky an ominous yellow-green. The air grew thick and still, charged with electricity. Horses grew restless in their stalls, and even the saloons seemed subdued. Eliza stood at her window again, watching the storm build. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the landscape in brief, stark moments. She thought of the Apache woman's eyes, proud despite her chains. She thought of her mother, who had died trying to be the perfect society wife. She thought of Harrington's spider hands and her father's debts. The first fat raindrops began to fall, bringing the smell of wet earth. But this was no ordinary storm. Within minutes, the rain turned to driving sheets of dust and sand, a haboob racing across the desert with terrifying speed. In that moment, Eliza made her decision. She gathered what few supplies she could, a canteen, some biscuits, matches wrapped in oilcloth, and her father's spare pistol, a small .32 caliber piece he'd forgotten he owned. She dressed in her plainest clothes, pinned up her hair, and wrapped herself in a dark shawl. The boarding house was chaos as people rushed to secure windows and doors against the storm. In the confusion, no one noticed one young woman slip out the back door and into the teeth of the tempest. The sand hit her like a physical force, driving needles into exposed skin. She could barely see 3 feet ahead, but she pressed on, using the buildings as guide until she reached the edge of town. Then there was nothing but instinct and desperation, driving her into the desert storm. Within minutes, she was hopelessly lost. The world had become a howling wall of sand and darkness. She stumbled over rocks, caught her skirts on thorny ocotillo, felt the sting of flying debris. Her eyes streamed tears that turned to mud on her cheeks. Still, she pressed on, preferring death in the desert to life in Harrington's house. Time lost meaning in the storm. It could have been hours or minutes when her strength finally gave out. She collapsed behind a large boulder, curling into herself as the storm raged overhead. Her last coherent thought was a prayer, not for rescue, but for freedom. Whatever form it took, the storm would pass, as all storms do. But Eliza Whitmore would not return to Cedar Ridge. Her father would search. Harrington would rage. The townspeople would whisper. But the desert keeps its secrets. And sometimes, in the vast wildness of the frontier, a person could simply disappear, swallowed by the land itself. What none of them could know was that Eliza's story was not ending, but beginning, that somewhere in those trackless wastes, other eyes had witnessed the storm, and other hands would soon reach out to save or damn her. The frontier was a place of second chances and sudden death, where civilization's rules grew thin and ancient ways still held power. As consciousness faded, Eliza heard something beyond the storm's fury, a sound like singing, wild and free as the wind itself. Apache, her fading mind supplied, though how she knew this, she couldn't say. The last thing she felt was a strange sense of peace, as if she'd finally found the adventure she'd sought, even if it killed her. The first sensation was coolness against her burning skin, a damp cloth moving gently across her forehead. Eliza's eyes fluttered open to find herself in a cave, firelight dancing across stone walls worn smooth by centuries of wind and water. The storm's howl had faded to a distant whisper, replaced by the crackle of burning mesquite and the soft drip of water somewhere in the darkness. A figure moved in her peripheral vision, and she turned her head too quickly, sending the world spinning. When her vision cleared, she found herself looking into eyes dark as obsidian, set in a face carved by sun and wind into austere beauty. The man appeared to be in his mid-20s, with high cheekbones and black hair that fell past his shoulders. He wore a simple cotton shirt and deer-hide leggings, and around his neck hung a small leather pouch decorated with turquoise beads. Fear shot through her like lightning. She scrambled backward, her hand instinctively reaching for the pistol that was no longer at her waist. "No move," he said in accented English, raising one hand in a gesture of peace. "You safe." His voice was deep, gentle despite its unfamiliarity with her language. He sat back on his heels, giving her space, and she noticed the careful way he moved, as if trying not to frighten a wounded animal. "Where?" Her voice came out as a croak. He handed her a water gourd, and she drank greedily, tasting minerals and something sweet like honey. "Storm bring you," he said simply. "I find. Bring here." The cave was larger than she'd first realized, extending back into shadows. Near the fire lay her few possessions, carefully arranged. Her pistol sat among them, which surprised her. He could have easily disposed of it. "You're Apache," she said, not a question but a statement. He nodded once. "I'm called—" He paused, as if debating whether to trust her with his name. "Americans call me Thomas. My people call me Kuruk." At her blank look, he added, "Means bear." "I'm Eliza." She pulled the rough blanket tighter around herself, acutely aware of her vulnerability. "From the town, Cedar Ridge." Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps contempt, perhaps pity. "Why you run in storm? Death waits in such wind." She looked away, unable to meet his steady gaze. Death seemed preferable to what waited in town. He studied her for a long moment, then rose with fluid grace and moved to the fire. She watched as he stirred something in a small clay pot, his movements economical and sure. The smell that wafted over made her stomach clench with hunger. "Eat," he said, bringing her a wooden bowl filled with some kind of stew. She hesitated, and his lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "Not poison. If I want you dead, leave you in storm." The logic was irrefutable. She took the bowl and tasted cautiously. The stew was unlike anything she'd eaten. Rabbit meat, she thought, with wild onions and herbs she couldn't identify. It was delicious. As she ate, she studied her rescuer. Scars marked his arms and chest where the shirt gaped open, some old and silvered, others newer. His hands, she noticed, were gentle despite their obvious strength. This was not the savage the townspeople spoke of, but a man who had known violence and chosen another path. "Your family," she ventured. "Won't they be looking for you?" His face closed like a door slamming shut. "No family, all gone." The weight of those two words settled between them like stones. She thought of the Apache prisoners she'd seen, the hatred in the townspeople's faces, and understanding dawned. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He looked at her sharply, as if surprised by the sympathy. Then he shrugged, a gesture that didn't quite hide the pain. "It is the way. Your people take land, my people die, story old as mountains." Night had fallen completely, and the cave felt like a world apart from everything she'd known. Outside, coyotes called to each other, and an owl hooted somewhere nearby. Kuruk fed the fire with practiced efficiency, then settled across from her, his back against the stone wall. "Tomorrow, you go back," he said. It wasn't a question. "No." The word came out fiercer than she'd intended. "I can't, I won't." He tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle to solve. "Town people look for you, find you with Apache." He drew a finger across his throat in a gesture that needed no translation. "They were going to sell me," she said, the words tumbling out. "My father owes money to a merchant, Harrington. The payment is me, like I'm property to be traded." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that might have been respect. "So you choose desert, choose death over chains." "Yes." He was quiet for a long time, feeding small sticks to the fire. Finally, he spoke. "I know chains. Army catch me 2 winters past. Put in iron, take to fort. I escape, but—" He touched his side, where she now noticed another scar. "Freedom has price. How do you survive out here alone? Land provides, water and hidden springs, food in plants and animals. Apache live here 1,000 generations. We know secrets white men never learn." He paused. "But alone is difficult." Apache meant to live with family, clan, alone is half life. She understood that kind of loneliness, the ache of being surrounded by people yet utterly isolated, in Boston after her mother's death, in Cedar Ridge among strangers. She'd felt it keenly. Could you? She hesitated, then forged ahead. Could you teach me to survive? His eyebrows rose. You want to learn Apache ways? I want to learn to be free. He laughed then, a sound like water over rocks. Freedom, not something learn, something choose, every day. Harder than chains sometimes. Over the next hours, as the fire burned low, he showed her small things, how to bank the coals to last through the night, which sounds outside meant danger and which meant safety, how to read the shadows on the cave walls. His English improved as they talked, as if her presence unlocked words he'd stored away. She learned that his family had been killed in an attack 3 years ago, that he'd survived by hiding in these mountains, occasionally trading with Mexican settlers who were more tolerant than the Americans. He spoke of the old ways with a mixture of pride and sorrow, describing a world that was rapidly vanishing. Your people believe land can be owned, he said at one point. Like owning wind or rain, Apache know we belong to land, not other way. When exhaustion finally claimed her, he showed her a sandy alcove padded with pine needles and covered with soft hides. She hesitated at the threshold. I sleep there. He pointed to a spot near the cave entrance. Guard, you safe. Something in his tone, in the careful distance he maintained, eased her fears. She settled into the makeshift bed, surprised at its comfort. The last thing she saw before sleep took her was his silhouette against the dying fire, alert and watchful, a guardian she hadn't known she needed. She woke once in the night to find him gone, panic rising in her throat. But then she heard his voice outside, soft and melodic, singing in his own language. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, full of loss and longing, yet somehow comforting. She fell back asleep to that ancient music, feeling safer than she had in months. Morning brought reality crashing back. Through the cave mouth, she could see the desert transformed by the storm, arroyos carved where none had been before, familiar landmarks erased or altered. Karuk was already awake, preparing something over a small fire outside. Storm change everything, he said when she joined him. Old paths gone, new ones made, like life. She watched him work, noting the efficiency of every movement, the way he used every part of whatever plant or animal he'd gathered. Nothing was wasted. I still can't go back, she said. He handed her a piece of some kind of flatbread and a wooden cup of pine needle tea. Then, what you do? It was the question she'd been avoiding, even in her own mind. What did a 19-year-old woman do in the wilderness? How long before thirst, hunger, or violence found her? Stay here, she said impulsively. Learn from you, just for a while, until I figure out where to go. He was quiet so long she thought he'd refuse. Then, teaching white woman Apache ways, ancestors turning graves. Please. She hated the desperation in her voice, but couldn't hide it. I have nowhere else. He stood abruptly and walked to the cave mouth, staring out at the lightening sky. When he turned back, his face was unreadable. 3 days, he said finally. I teach basics, water, food, shelter. Then you choose, back to town or find other way. But staying here, he shook his head. Too dangerous. For both. 3 days. It wasn't much. But it was more than she'd had yesterday. She nodded acceptance, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, that she hadn't argued for more. First lesson, he said, his tone becoming businesslike. Everything in desert has 2 faces. One brings life, one brings death. Learn to see both, or desert claims you. As the sun rose over the transformed landscape, painting the rocks in shades of rose and gold, Eliza felt she was seeing the world clearly for the first time, somewhere behind them. Cedar Ridge was waking up, discovering her absence. But here, in this ancient place with this unlikely teacher, she was beginning to discover something else entirely, herself. The 3 days stretched into a week, then 2, as if the desert itself conspired to keep them together. Each dawn brought new lessons, and Eliza proved an eager student, drinking in knowledge like the earth after rain. "See here," Kuruk said one morning, kneeling beside a cluster of paddle-shaped cacti. "Prickly pear. Spines look like danger, yes, but fruit gives food. Pads give water. Burn off spines. Inside is medicine for wounds." She watched his hands work, noting how he used a stick to handle the treacherous plant, how he knew exactly where to cut. Everything had purpose in his world, every action deliberate and meaningful. "My people call this sacred plant," he continued, his English growing more fluent with each passing day. "Story says Coyote gave it to first Apache, teaching that sweetest things often wear sharpest thorns." Their days fell into rhythm. Morning meant checking snares he'd taught her to set, gathering plants while the air was cool. Midday they sheltered from the brutal sun, and he would tell her stories of his people. Not the bloodthirsty tales the townspeople spread, but stories of creation, of spider grandmother weaving the world, of child of water slaying monsters to make the earth safe for humanity. "Your people have one God," he said once. "Apache know many spirits. Mountain spirits, water spirits, spirits of animals and plants, all connected, like web." She thought of the stern Christianity of her upbringing, all thou shalt nots and damnation, and found his worldview infinitely more appealing. Here, the sacred lived in everything, in the cry of a hawk, the bloom of a cactus, the shift of shadows on stone. Evenings were for practical skills. He taught her to make fire without matches, to find water by watching birds, to read weather signs in cloud and wind. Her soft hands blistered, then calloused. Her fair skin burned, then bronzed. The mirror of a still pool showed her a stranger, leaner, stronger, with eyes that had lost their city softness. "You learn quick," he admitted one night as she successfully dressed a rabbit he'd snared. "Most whites," he shrugged, letting the sentence die. "Most whites don't have a patient teacher," she replied, then flushed at the warmth in his eyes. They were careful with each other, maintaining physical distance even as emotional walls crumbled. She learned to read his silences, to understand that his seeming stoicism masked deep feelings. He never spoke directly of his losses, but she heard them in the songs he sang at night, saw them in the way he touched certain objects, a beaded pouch, a carved bone whistle, with reverent sadness. One evening, as they sat by the fire, he finally told her the whole story. 3 winters passed, soldiers came to our winter camp, said we steal cattle, but was lie. We were peaceful band, led by my uncle, Niley. He tried to talk, explain, they not listen. His voice remained steady, but his hands clenched and unclenched rhythmically. I was hunting, 2 days away, saw smoke, rode back fast, too late, all gone, mother, sister, woman I would marry. Soldiers burned everything, left bodies for coyotes. Eliza's eyes burned with tears. How did you survive? Almost didn't. Wanted to attack soldiers, die fighting, but elders survived too. Old medicine woman named Dasoda. She say my path different, say I must live, keep stories alive. So I live, but he touched his chest. Here is empty place that will not fill. Without thinking, she reached across the space between them, covering his hand with hers. He went very still, staring at their joined hands as if they were something miraculous and terrifying. Eliza, he said, his voice rough. This cannot be. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Your people, my people, oil and water. Together only makes poison. But he didn't pull his hand away, and she felt the tremor that ran through him. In that moment, she understood that he was as affected by their proximity as she was, that the careful distance he maintained was protection for both of them. The spell was broken by the sound of horses in the distance. Kuruk was on his feet instantly, dousing the fire with practiced speed. He pressed a finger to his lips and led her deeper into the cave, to a narrow passage she hadn't known existed. They waited in darkness, hardly breathing. The horses came closer, and she heard voices, English, harsh and demanding. Her blood ran cold as she recognized one of them, Jake Morrison. Harrington's foreman. Tracks lead this way. Sure enough, that Apache's been helping her. Mark my words. Mister, Harrington wants her back alive, another voice said. The Apache, though. String him up as a warning. Show these savages what happens when they take white women. The voices faded as the riders passed, but the danger remained. When Kuruk finally spoke, his voice was grim. They not give up. Your man, he wants his property. I'm not property, she spat. No, but men like him not see difference between woman and horse. Both to be broken, owned. He was already gathering supplies. His movements swift and economical. We must leave. They come back with more men, dogs to track. Where will we go? He paused in his packing. We? Eliza, you must understand. I understand perfectly. She stood, chin raised defiantly. I understand that going back means a living death. I understand that you're the first person to treat me as an equal, not a possession. I understand that I would rather die in this desert than submit to Harrington. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. There is place, deeper in mountains, sacred Apache place, forbidden to whites, but taking you there. He shook his head. Break every law of my people. Your people are gone, she said gently. Perhaps it's time for new laws. Something shifted in his expression then. A wall, crumbling. You speak dangerous words. These are dangerous times. They left the cave that night, traveling by moonlight along paths only he could see. Eliza had thought herself hardened by 2 weeks in the desert, but this journey tested every limit. They climbed rock faces that seemed impossible, waded through icy streams, pushed through thorny passages that tore at clothing and skin. Dawn found them high in the mountains, in a place of breathtaking beauty. Pine and juniper grew thick, and a waterfall tumbled into a crystal pool. Ancient petroglyphs marked the canyon walls, spirals and stick figures, handprints and animal shapes. This is Ga'an Canyon, Kuruk said softly, where mountain spirits dance. No white person has seen this place and lived. The weight of that statement hung between them. By bringing her here, he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Over the following days, they established a new camp in a hidden grove near the water. The living was easier here. Game was plentiful. Water abundant. The high altitude cooler than the desert below. But the sacred nature of the place demanded respect. Kuruk taught her the proper prayers, the offerings to leave for the spirits, the areas that must not be disturbed. Why? She asked one day as they gathered pine nuts. Why risk everything for me? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, first time I saw you, in town, you tried to help Apache prisoners, saw soldiers push women, saw you step forward. Your father stopped you, but I saw your heart. She stared at him. You were there? Trading with Mexican blacksmith. Saw everything. He looked away. Thought, here is white woman with Apache spirit, rare like rain in drought. That night, as they sat by their small fire, she asked him to teach her his language. He looked surprised but pleased. Is hard for white tongue, he warned. Try me. He started with simple words. Water, fire, moon. His face lit up when she managed the difficult sounds, and she realized how lonely he must have been, with no one to speak his mother tongue. What's the word for friend? She asked. Shikij, he said softly. Shikij, she repeated, and saw something warm kindle in his eyes, as the stars wheeled overhead and a wolf sang somewhere in the darkness. Eliza felt she had found something she hadn't known she was looking for. Not just survival, not just freedom, but connection. A bridge across the chasm that history had carved between their peoples. Tomorrow would bring new dangers. The searchers wouldn't give up easily, and winter would come to the mountains. A white woman living with an Apache man broke every rule of both their worlds. But tonight, in this sacred place, with the ancient spirits as witnesses, none of that mattered. Teach me more, she said, and he smiled, a real smile that transformed his austere features. Ishkin, he said, pointing to himself. Boy, man, is son, she repeated, pointing to herself. Woman, ill, he said, gesturing between them. Together. The word hung in the air like a promise and a prayer, fragile as spun glass, strong as the mountains around them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The morning dawned crystal clear, the kind of day that made the mountains seem to glow with inner light. Eliza had risen early to gather water, humming one of the Apache songs Kuruk had taught her. She had just knelt by the stream when the crack of a rifle split the air. "Apache, step away from the woman!" Her blood froze. A line of men emerged from the trees, soldiers in blue uniforms, their rifles trained on the grove. Behind them came civilians, including Jake Morrison and, to her horror, her father. Kuruk appeared at the edge of camp, his hands raised but his bearing proud. "She is here by choice," he called out. "Shut your mouth, savage!" Morrison spat tobacco juice. "Miss Whitmore, come here. Your father's worried sick." Samuel Whitmore pushed forward, his face haggard. "Eliza, for God's sake!" "What have you done?" She stood slowly, the water jug forgotten. "What have I done? I've chosen freedom. Father, something you sold along with your debts." "He's bewitched you," Samuel said desperately. "These heathens, they have ways." The only bewitchment was kindness. She interrupted. "He saved my life, taught me to survive. He treated me with more respect than any white man ever has." A young lieutenant stepped forward. "Miss Whitmore, I'm Lieutenant Carson. We're here to bring you home safely. This Apache is wanted for theft and kidnapping." "Lies!" The word burst from her. "I came willingly. He's stolen nothing." "Eliza," Kuruk said quietly in Apache. "Go with them. Better for you." "No." She moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel the tension radiating from his body. Morrison's face darkened. "So the savage has turned you into his squaw. Mister, Harrington won't be pleased. I care nothing for Harrington's pleasure." "You will." Morrison nodded to the soldiers. "Take the Apache. The lady comes with us." Everything happened at once. Soldiers moved forward. Kuruk stepped protectively in front of Eliza, and Morrison drew his pistol. The crack of gunfire echoed off the canyon walls, and Kuruk spun, clutching his shoulder as blood seeped between his fingers. "No!" Eliza caught him as he staggered, her hands immediately going to the wound. The bullet had passed through the muscle, missing bone but bleeding freely. "Step away from him, miss." Lieutenant Carson's voice held a note of sympathy but no uncertainty. "He'll be treated fairly, like the Apache at Fort Grant were treated fairly," she snapped, remembering stories Kuruk had told her. "Murdered under a flag of truce." She tore strips from her petticoat, pressing them against the wound while Kuruk watched her with eyes full of pain that had nothing to do with the bullet. "Ishkeen," she whispered. "Be strong." His hand covered hers, heedless of the blood. "You must go." "They kill you too. Say I did it." "Enough of this." Morrison strode forward. "Carson, if you won't do your duty." The lieutenant blocked his path. "I command here. Mr. Morrison. We'll do this properly." He turned to Eliza. "Miss, I give you my word as an officer that if you come peacefully, the Apache will receive medical treatment and a fair trial. Your word." She laughed bitterly. "The word of men who break treaties like twigs." Her father approached cautiously. "Eliza, please, whatever hold he has on you. The only hold is love." The words rang out clear and true, silencing everyone. "Do you hear me, Father? I love him. This Apache, this savage, has shown me more genuine care in weeks than you showed in years." Samuel's face went white. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." She helped Kuruk sit against a boulder, keeping pressure on the wound. "I know that you would sell me to pay your debts. I know that Harrington sees me as property to own. And I know that this man," she looked at Kuruk, letting all her feelings show in her eyes, "sees me as a person worthy of respect." Kuruk's good hand reached up to touch her face. "Nijoni," he murmured. "Beautiful one, go, live. Not without you." Morrison had heard enough. "For Christ's sake, Carson, she's clearly gone native. Grab her and let's go. Two soldiers moved forward reluctantly. Eliza's hand found the knife at Karuk's belt, drawing it in one smooth motion. The first man who touches either of us will bleed, she said quietly. The soldiers hesitated. A white woman defending an Apache with a weapon. It went against every rule they knew. Eliza, her father pleaded. You're not thinking clearly. The desert, the isolation, it's affected your mind. Come home, and we'll forget this happened. Forget? She kept the knife steady despite her trembling. Forget that I found someone who values me? Forget that I learned to be strong? Forget that there's another way to live beyond your debts and schemes? Lieutenant Carson was studying her with intelligent eyes. Miss Whitmore, you're clearly an educated woman. You must know how this ends, even if we leave now. Others will come. Your attachment to this man puts you both in danger. Then we'll face that danger together. A commotion in the trees drew everyone's attention. More Apache had arrived, a band of 6 warriors, painted and armed. The soldiers swung their rifles around. Fingers on triggers. Hold fire, Carson ordered sharply. One of the Apache, an older man with silver threading his hair, spoke in accented English. This place sacred. White men not welcome. We're representatives of the United States Army, Carson began. Army has no power here. The warrior's eyes found Karuk. Nephew, you bring whites to sacred ground? Karuk answered in Apache, his voice strained but firm. Eliza caught her name, saw the warrior's eyes widen as they looked at her. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Then the elder spoke again. Apache law says white woman who enters sacred place must die. But he studied Eliza with eyes that seemed to see through her. Woman who stands with knife to protect Apache is perhaps not white in spirit. What are you saying? Morrison demanded. The elder ignored him, addressing Eliza directly. You choose this path of thorns and blood. I choose love. She answered simply. Whatever comes with it. The elder nodded slowly, then spoke rapid Apache to his warriors. They spread out, weapons ready but not directly threatening. You take wounded Apache. You fight all Apache, the elder told Carson. You leave now. No blood except what already spilled. Carson was no fool. 6 Apache in their own territory could devastate his small force. And the woman? Woman chooses her path. The lieutenant looked at Eliza one more time. Miss Whitmore, I'm required to ask once more. Will you come with us voluntarily? I will not. Eliza, her father's voice broke. You're my daughter. I was your daughter. Now I'm my own woman. She softened slightly at the genuine pain in his eyes. Go home, Father. Tell Harrington I died in the desert. It's true enough. The girl he wanted to buy no longer exists. Carson made his decision. We're leaving, Mr. Whitmore. Mr. Morrison, we're done here. Morrison erupted. You can't just leave her with these savages. I can, and I will. I won't start a war over a woman who's made her choice clear. Carson's voice carried the authority of command. Mount up. As the soldiers prepared to leave, Samuel made one last attempt. Eliza, your mother would... My mother died trying to be what men expected. Eliza cut him off. I won't make her mistake. The old pain flickered across Samuel's face. Then his shoulders slumped in defeat. May God forgive me, he whispered, turning away. The soldiers and civilians filed out, Morrison cursing and threatening to return. As the sound of horses faded, Eliza's strength gave out. The knife fell from nerveless fingers as she turned back to Karuk. The Apache warriors had moved in, the elder kneeling beside Karuk to examine the wound. He spoke in Apache, and one of the younger warriors ran off, returning with plants Eliza recognized from Karuk's teachings. Wound not deep, the elder said. He live, if spirits will it. His ancient eyes fixed on Eliza. You know what you have done. Can never go back to your people. They were never my people. She helped support Karuk as the elder worked. People are those who accept you as you are. The elder's weathered face cracked in what might have been a smile. You speak like Apache. Maybe spirit in white body, like old stories tell. As they tended Kuruk's wound, Eliza felt the world shift around her. She had crossed more than cultural lines. She had chosen a side in an undeclared war. There would be no church wedding, no social acceptance, no comfortable future. Instead, there would be hiding and running, the constant threat of violence, the weight of being caught between two worlds that refused to coexist. But as Kuruk's hand found hers, as the sacred mountains stood witness to their choice, she regretted nothing. Love had always been dangerous for women. Her mother had died slowly in a cage of expectations, while Eliza would live freely, whatever the cost. Will it hurt? She'd asked once in fear. Now she knew the answer. Yes, it would hurt. Love, freedom, choice. They all carried pain as their shadow, but they also carried joy fierce as lightning, sweet as spring water, vast as the sky above. Be gentle, she'd pleaded, meaning so many things. And he had been gentle in teaching, in waiting, in loving. Now it was her turn to be gentle as she helped bind his wounds. Her hands steady despite the blood, her heart steady despite the fear. The sun climbed toward noon, painting the sacred canyon in shades of gold and red. Somewhere below, her father rode back to a world of debts and obligations. Here, in this place of ancient spirits and new beginnings, Eliza Whitmore began to understand what it truly meant to be free. The weeks following the confrontation passed in a blur of healing and transformation. Kuruk's shoulder mended slowly under the elder's care, leaving him frustrated by his temporary weakness. The elder, whose name was Naichi, had decided to stay, along with two younger warriors, creating an uneasy community in the sacred canyon. Your presence brings danger, Naichi told Eliza one evening as she prepared the herbal poultice he'd taught her. Soldiers, remember, they come back. Then we'll be ready, she replied, crushing juniper berries with practiced efficiency. The old man studied her with those penetrating eyes. You speak brave words, but you know nothing of what comes. When Apache and white become one, both sides seek blood. That night, as the first stars appeared above the canyon walls, Eliza found Kuruk sitting by the waterfall, his injured arm bound against his chest. The moonlight turned the cascading water to liquid silver, and the sound filled the grove with ancient music. You're troubled, she said, settling beside him on the smooth stone. He was quiet for a long moment. Naichi speaks truth. My selfishness brings you only sorrow. Your selfishness? She turned to face him fully. I made my choice. Don't dishonor it by calling it your doing. You don't understand. Then help me understand. She took his good hand in both of hers. Talk to me, not as Apache to White, but as Kuruk to Eliza. His fingers tightened around hers. In my dreams, I see you happy, living in a house with windows and wooden floors, wearing fine dresses, raising children who go to school, growing old in peace. His voice roughened. Then I wake, and you are here, hiding like hunted animal, hands rough from work, facing death for choosing me. And in my dreams, she said softly, I see myself dying slowly in that house with windows. I see myself bearing children for a man who views me as property. I see my spirit withering like flowers without water. She lifted their joined hands to her lips. Here, I am alive. Here, I choose each day what I will be. He turned to her then, his free hand rising to cup her face. Ni Joni, he murmured, my beautiful, stubborn one. Teach me what that means, she whispered. All of it. The real meaning. It means. He paused, searching for words in English that could capture Apache thought. Beauty that lives not just in flesh, but in spirit. Like sunrise that paints mountains, like eagle that rides wind. Beauty that cannot be caged or owned, only honored. The space between them hummed with electricity stronger than any summer storm. When he leaned toward her, she met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that tasted of juniper smoke and wild honey. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if they both feared the other might vanish like morning mist, then deeper, hungrier, full of weeks of careful distance crumbling like sand. When they finally parted, both breathing unsteadily. Eliza saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. "I love you," she said in Apache, the words clumsy on her tongue but heartfelt. He laughed, the sound rich with joy and disbelief. "Your accent is terrible." "Then teach me better." She kissed him again, brief but sweet. "We have time, do we?" The shadow returned to his eyes. "Naichi says, Naichi is not us." She stood, pulling him up with her. "Come. The night is beautiful, and your shoulder needs gentle movement." They walked along the stream, fingers intertwined, speaking in a mixture of English and Apache that had become their private language. The canyon held its breath around them, as if the ancient spirits themselves blessed this improbable union. Near a grove of ancient pines, Karuk stopped. "Here," he said quietly. "This is where my people came for." He searched for words. "For joining ceremonies, when man and woman became one." Eliza felt her heart skip. "Tell me about it." Woman's family would bring gifts, blankets, baskets, food. Man's family would bring horses, weapons, promises of protection. Both would speak before the people, saying why they chose each other. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Then they would share a dwelling, and all would know they were one. "We have no families to bring gifts," she said softly. "No, we have only ourselves to offer." He faced her fully, his expression grave. "But I would speak words, if you would hear them." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Eliza Whitmore," he began formally, "I offer you all I am and all I have, my knowledge of the land, my strength for your protection, my heart for your keeping. I offer you truth when lies would be easier, gentleness when the world is hard, love when others give hate." He paused, vulnerability flickering across his features. "It is little compared to what your own people could give, but it is everything I possess." Tears ran freely down her face as she answered. "Thomas Karuk, I offer you all I am and all I choose to become. My courage when yours falters, my faith when darkness comes, my love without condition or end. I offer you partnership, not servitude, strength beside yours, not behind it." She smiled through her tears. "I have no baskets or blankets, but I have myself, and that is no small gift." "No," he agreed, wiping her tears with infinite tenderness. "It is the greatest gift creation can bestow." They sealed their vows with a kiss that held promise and passion in equal measure. When they returned to camp, Naichi took one look at them and snorted. "About time," the elder muttered. "Young people think they hide feelings, but blind man could see what burns between you." Over the following days, the small band worked to create something unprecedented, a life that honored both worlds. Eliza learned to prepare traditional foods while teaching the warriors English letters in exchange. Karuk, his shoulder healing, showed her deeper mysteries of Apache spirituality while she shared stories of literature and distant places. One night, as they lay beneath a blanket of stars, Eliza traced the scar forming on his shoulder. "Does it hurt still?" "All scars hurt," he said quietly. "But they also remind us we survived." "I want to give you something," she said suddenly. "A new name, an Apache name." He raised an eyebrow. "That is not how it works." "Nothing about us is how it works." She propped herself on one elbow, studying his face in the starlight. "I name you Guyen. It means wise one." "Yes." He was quiet so long she feared she'd offended him. Then, "Guyen was woman's name, great warrior woman who avenged her husband's death." "Then it's perfect." She kissed the scar gently. "You are wise enough to see past hatred, warrior enough to choose love over revenge. If names can cross from Apache to English, why not from woman to man? You would remake all the world's rules," he said, but his tone was admiring. "Only the foolish ones. They made love then, beneath the ancient stars. Their joining as natural as sunrise, as powerful as storm. In that sacred space, witnessed by spirits old as stone, they wrote their own laws, created their own world where love transcended the artificial boundaries humans drew. Afterward, as they lay entwined, Karuk spoke into the darkness. When I was boy, grandmother told me story. Said someday, when hatred grew too strong, spirits would send teachers in unexpected form, bridge builders, she called them, people who would show new way. You think we're bridge builders? I think we are fools in love, he said, and she could hear his smile. But perhaps that is what bridge builders always are. The next morning brought news that changed everything. One of the young warriors, Dakia, returned from a scouting expedition with a grim expression. Soldiers build fort, he reported. 2 days' ride. Many men, many guns. They say they come to pacify Apache threat. Naichi's face darkened. It begins. They come to finish what they started. We should move deeper into the mountains. Another warrior suggested. No. Karuk stood, his shoulder fully healed now. Running makes us pray. We need different path. What path? Naichi demanded. You would fight, few against many. Not fight, trade, treaty. Karuk looked at Eliza, a plan forming in his eyes. What if bridge already exists? What if we make peace before war comes? It was audacious, naive perhaps, but Eliza felt hope kindle in her chest. They had already proven that love could bloom between supposed enemies. Could they prove that peace was possible too? The soldiers won't listen to Apache, Naichi said flatly. No, Eliza agreed. But they might listen to a white woman who chose Apache life, a woman who can speak for both worlds. The elder studied her, then smiled, a rare, transformative expression. Bridge builder indeed. Very well. We try your way, but if it fails, we fight, Karuk said simply. But first, we try to build tomorrow instead of mourning yesterday. As the sun climbed higher, painting the sacred canyon in shades of hope, Eliza felt the weight and wonder of the path they'd chosen. Behind them lay safety and isolation. Ahead lay danger, possibility, the chance to forge something new from the ashes of 2 broken worlds. Are you ready? Karuk asked, taking her hand. I've been ready since the night I walked into that sandstorm, she replied. Together. They began preparing for the most important performance of their lives, one that would determine not just their own fate, but perhaps the fate of all who might follow their unprecedented path. The journey to Fort McKenna took 3 days through treacherous mountain passes. Eliza rode beside Karuk, wearing a mixture of Apache and American clothing that marked her as belonging to neither world fully. Behind them rode Naichi and 2 warriors, while Dakia scouted ahead, wary of ambush. Remember, Karuk said as the fort's walls came into view. Speak first of trade, then of peace. Soldiers understand profit better than brotherhood. The fort squatted on the desert floor like a wooden beast, its walls bristling with guards. As their small party approached under a white flag, Eliza felt the weight of dozens of rifle barrels tracking their movement. Halt! A sergeant called from the gate. State your business. Eliza nudged her horse forward, hands visible and empty. I am Eliza Whitmore, formerly of Cedar Ridge. I come to speak with your commanding officer about matters of mutual benefit. The guards exchanged glances. Word of the white woman who'd chosen Apache life had spread like wildfire through the territory. Miss Whitmore, the sergeant said carefully, you're listed as a captive? Are you here of your own free will? I have never been more free. Sergeant, may we enter? The sun is harsh, and our message is important. After tense deliberation, they were admitted, though under heavy guard. The fort's interior revealed the harsh reality of frontier military life. Dust, heat, and men far from home trying to impose order on a land that defied it. Colonel Marcus Bradford received them in his office, a spare room dominated by maps and the smell of pipe tobacco. He was younger than Eliza expected, perhaps 40, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Miss Whitmore, he said, not offering a seat. Your father has been sick with worry, and Mr. Harrington has offered a substantial reward for your safe return. I'm not a lost horse to be collected for bounty. Colonel, I'm here to discuss preventing bloodshed. Bradford's eyes flicked to Karuk. And you are? He is my husband, Eliza said firmly, watching the colonel's face tighten. In Apache custom and in the eyes of God, if not American law. Miss Whitmore, surely you understand. What I understand, Colonel, is that you're building this fort to combat an Apache threat? What if that threat could become an alliance? Bradford leaned back, skepticism plain on his face. Go on. Eliza laid out their proposal with the eloquence her Eastern education had provided. The Apache band would establish trading posts, serving as intermediaries between the military and other native groups. They would share knowledge of water sources, safe passages, and weather patterns. In exchange, they wanted written guarantee of safe passage and the right to remain in their traditional territories. You speak well, Bradford said when she finished. But you're asking me to trust hostiles who've been raiding settlements for decades. Have these specific people raided your settlements? Eliza challenged. Or are you punishing them for the crimes of others who share their blood? Nietzsche spoke then, his English careful but clear. Colonel, I am old, have seen much war, much death. My sons, my brothers, all gone to fighting. What victory and more graves. We offered different path. The meeting stretched for hours, with Bradford's lieutenant taking notes and asking pointed questions. Through it all, Kuruk remained silent, but his presence was felt. A warrior choosing peace, more powerful than any threat. As the sun began to sink, raised voices erupted outside. The door burst open, and Jake Morrison stormed in, face flushed with drink and fury. There she is, he snarled. The Apache's whore. Colonel, I demand you arrest these savages. Mr. Morrison, you're interrupting official business, Bradford said coldly. Official business? Morrison laughed harshly. She's bewitched, Colonel, living in sin with this heathen. Mr. Harrington demands justice. Mr. Harrington has no authority here, Eliza said calmly, though her heart raced. And I'll thank you not to use such language. Morrison's hand went to his gun. You'll thank me, you ungrateful. The click of multiple weapons cocking filled the room. The Apache warriors had their hands on their knives, while Bradford's guards aimed rifles at everyone. Stand down, Bradford commanded. Morrison, leave my office immediately, or I'll have you in irons. You take their side? Morrison's face purpled. Against your own kind. I take the side of law and order. Get out! Morrison backed toward the door, his eyes never leaving Eliza. This isn't over. Harrington has friends, influence. You can't hide behind these savages forever. After he left, Bradford sighed deeply. He represents a problem. Miss Whitmore. Many settlers share his views. Even if I were inclined to accept your proposal, which I'm not saying I am, the political ramifications. Colonel, Eliza leaned forward. What are the political ramifications of endless war? How many soldiers will die trying to root out an enemy that knows this land like you know your own hand? How many widows will curse your name? Bradford was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'll need to telegraph Washington. This is beyond my authority alone. You'll remain here as... He paused, choosing his words. Guests, while I await response. They were given quarters in a storage building hastily cleared for the purpose. As night fell, Eliza found herself pacing the small space like a caged animal. You did well, Kuruk said, catching her hands to still her movement. Spoke with wisdom and strength. But will it be enough? She pressed against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. Morrison won't give up, and there are many like him. There are also many like Bradford. Nietzsche observed from his corner. Men who think beyond today, it is beginning. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see flames rising from beyond the fort walls. Soldiers ran past, shouting orders. The door flew open and a young lieutenant appeared. There's been an attack on a settler wagon. Apache, they say. Colonel wants you under guard until this is sorted. We've been here all day, Eliza protested. Not you, maybe. But Apache are Apache to the settlers. One raid undoes 100 peace talks. They spent the night under armed guard, listening to the chaos outside. By dawn, the truth emerged. The raid had been staged. Morrison and several others had attacked a Mexican trader's wagon, leaving Apache arrows as evidence. Crude frame-up, Bradford told them, disgust clear in his voice. The arrows were wrong type, and Morrison was too drunk to hide his tracks properly. He's in custody. What happens now? Eliza asked. Now I have a delicate situation. Arresting white men for trying to frame Apache won't win me friends. He studied them thoughtfully. But it does suggest that some people benefit from conflict. Perhaps your proposal has merit after all. The next days blurred together. Meetings, negotiations, careful diplomacy. Bradford proved surprisingly adept at finding middle ground, while Eliza served as translator not just of language, but of culture. The breakthrough came when a genuine Apache raid struck a mining camp 50 miles south. Bradford prepared to mobilize his troops, but Kuruk intervened. "Let us go first," he proposed. "Apache to Apache. If we can stop this without blood." It was a risk. The raiders might kill them as traitors. But Bradford, perhaps seeing an opportunity, agreed. They rode hard through the night, Eliza insisting on accompanying despite protests. At dawn, they found the raiding party, young warriors from a different band, angry and desperate. The confrontation was tense. The raid leader, barely 20, spat at Kuruk's feet when he spoke of peace. "You take white woman, speak white words." The young warrior accused, "You are no longer Apache. I am Apache who chooses tomorrow over yesterday." Kuruk replied calmly, "How many of us must die before we learn?" Eliza watched, understanding only fragments but feeling the weight of the moment. Then Naichi spoke, his age and evident wisdom commanding respect. He talked of losses, of children who would never grow old, of the choice between honorable survival and glorious extinction. When the sun reached its zenith, the raid leader finally lowered his weapons. "We will hear more of this path," he said grudgingly. "But if it is trick, I will hand you the knife myself." Kuruk promised. They returned to the fort with news of success. Bradford, visibly relieved, telegraphed Washington with a glowing report. The response, when it came, was cautiously optimistic. Proceed with limited trial, report results. As they prepared to leave the fort, Eliza felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. They had taken the first steps on an impossible path. "You know, this is just beginning," Bradford warned as they mounted up. "There will be setbacks, violence from both sides who profit from war." "We know," Eliza replied. "But every peace begins with someone choosing not to fight." As they rode back toward the mountains, Kuruk reached over to take her hand. "You were magnificent," he said simply. "We were magnificent," she corrected. "All of us, even Bradford. In the end, bridge builders." Naichi mused from behind them. Perhaps grandmother's prophecy comes true after all. The sacred canyon welcomed them home with the sound of water and wind in the pines. That night, as they lay together under familiar stars, Eliza knew they had crossed another threshold. The path ahead remained treacherous, but they had proven something important, that enemies could choose to be allies, that love could indeed conquer hate. One careful step at a time. "No regrets?" Kuruk asked softly. "Only one," she said, tracing patterns on his chest. "That we have only one lifetime to change the world. Then we better not waste it," he replied, pulling her close. Outside their shelter, an owl called across the canyon, its voice echoing off ancient walls that had seen so much conflict. But tonight, in this small corner of a vast land, peace held sway. It was fragile as a flower in the desert, but like all desert flowers, it was also fierce in its determination to bloom. The wound came at dawn, 3 weeks after their return from Fort McKenna. Kuruk had been scouting the lower passes when Morrison's men found him. The crack of rifles shattered the morning stillness, and by the time Dakea reached him, blood was already pooling beneath his body. They carried him back to the sacred canyon on a makeshift litter, his breathing shallow and labored. The bullet had torn through his side, and though Naichi worked with all his healing knowledge, the old man's eyes held shadows. "The wound festers," he told Eliza privately as she kept vigil. White man's bullets carry poison our medicine cannot always cure. She refused to accept it. Drawing on half-remembered lessons from her mother's sick room, she boiled water, tore clean bandages, and fought infection with the fierce determination of love facing loss. For 3 days and nights, she never left his side, spooning willow bark tea between his fevered lips, singing the Apache songs he'd taught her when delirium took him. On the 4th dawn, his fever broke. His eyes opened, focused and clear, finding her face. "Nijoni," he whispered. "You look terrible." She laughed through her tears, collapsing against his chest with relief. "You're one to talk." As Kuruk recovered, word came from unexpected sources. A young Mexican trader arrived with supplies and news. The Apache bands were talking. The story of the white woman and the Apache warrior who chose peace over war had spread like wildfire through the territory. Some called them traitors, but others, especially among those tired of burying their children, whispered of hope. "There is to be gathering." The trader reported, "Hidden Valley, next full moon. Many bands send representatives. They want to hear your words." Eliza felt the weight of possibility and responsibility settle on her shoulders. "We'll be there." The journey to the Hidden Valley tested Kuruk's recovering strength, but he insisted on riding rather than being carried. The valley, when they finally reached it, took Eliza's breath away. Ancient cottonwoods lined a crystal stream, and the walls held pictographs telling stories older than memory. Apache had gathered from across the territory, perhaps 50 in all, men and women who had survived wars, removals, and massacres. The atmosphere crackled with tension. These were people who had every reason to distrust any promise of peace, especially one that came attached to a white woman. An elderly woman approached them first, her face a map of years and sorrow. She studied Eliza with eyes that had seen too much. "You are the one who stands between worlds," she said in accented English. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. "My granddaughter says you must be very brave or very foolish." "Perhaps both," Eliza admitted. "Good. Wisdom often wears fool's face." The woman touched Eliza's face gently. "I am Lozen. I rode with Geronimo. Fought your people many years. Now I'm old and tired of fighting. Speak your truth. White Apache woman." "We will listen." The council convened as sunset painted the valley in shades of blood and gold. Eliza stood before the assembled Apache, feeling the weight of their attention, their skepticism, their desperate hope. She spoke first in Apache, her accent drawing some smiles, but her earnestness commanding attention. She told them of her journey, not hiding her privileged beginnings, but explaining how the desert and Kuruk's teaching had opened her eyes. She spoke of the meetings at Fort McKenna, of Colonel Bradford's willingness to consider new paths, of the young warriors who had chosen to turn from raiding. "I know I am outsider," she said, switching to English for those who understood it better. "I know my people have given you every reason to hate, to trust nothing we say. But I also know this. Hatred is a fire that burns the one who carries it. I have seen what peace might look like. Not perfect, not without pain, but better than endless war." An old warrior stood, his scarred face stern. "Pretty words, but what happens when soldiers change mind? When your Colonel Bradford is replaced by one who prefers bullets to talk? We have heard promises before." Kuruk rose despite his wound. "Then we fight, but we fight having tried peace first. We fight knowing some whites stood with us. We fight with truth as our weapon, that we offered partnership and were refused." He looked around the circle. "How is that worse than fighting now, alone, growing fewer each season?" The debate raged through the night, old grievances aired, fears voiced, anger expressed. Eliza listened, learning more about the depth of wounds between the peoples than any history book could have taught. These were not abstract policies being discussed, but lives lost, families destroyed, entire ways of life threatened with extinction. Near dawn, when voices had grown hoarse and the fire burned low, young mother stood. She carried a baby on her back, and her voice shook with emotion. "I want my son to live," she said simply. "Not just survive, but live, to know our songs and stories. Yes, but also to walk freely in the world that is coming whether we will it or not. If this white woman risks everything to build bridge, can we not risk walking on it? The vote, when it came, was close but clear. The gathered bands would send representatives to meet with Colonel Bradford. They would explore this narrow path between war and surrender. As the council dispersed, Lozin approached Eliza again. You carry heavy burden now. Both peoples will watch you, wait for you to fail. Some on both sides will try to make you fail. I know. Do you? Do you know that even if you succeed, you will belong fully to neither world? Your children, she glanced meaningfully at Eliza's belly, will face same challenge. Eliza's hand went instinctively to her stomach. She hadn't been certain, but the old woman's knowing eyes confirmed what she'd begun to suspect. Then I'll teach them to be bridges too, she said quietly. The journey back to their canyon took longer. The group now swollen with Apache representatives who would prepare for the formal peace talks. Among them was a young woman named Ayanna, whose brother had been killed by soldiers the previous winter. She watched Eliza with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. Why? Ayanna asked one evening as they made camp. Why choose this hard path? You could have easy life with your people. Eliza considered her answer carefully. What is easy life worth if it's built on lies? If it requires me to be less than I am? She gestured to where Karuk was teaching a young boy to track. He sees me, not white woman to own or Apache sympathizer to pity. But me, how could I choose anything else? Ayanna was quiet for a long moment. Then, I hope your child inherits your courage. It will need it. News of the pregnancy spread through the group, adding another layer of complexity to their situation. A child of two worlds, some whispered, was either blessing or curse. None were sure which. That night, as they lay together under familiar stars, Karuk placed his hand gently on her still flat belly. Are you afraid? Terrified, she admitted. But also, she searched for words. It feels right. Like this child is proof that different peoples can create something new together. The world may not be kind to such proof. Then we'll make the world kinder. He kissed her forehead. Spoken like true Apache, stubborn in face of impossible odds. The next morning brought troubling news. Dakaya returned from scouting with reports of military movement. A new commander was coming to Fort McKenna, one with a reputation for harsh measures against hostiles. Bradford being replaced? Naichi frowned. This bode ill. They pushed harder, reaching the fort just as the changing of command was taking place. Colonel Bradford met them outside the walls, his face grim. I'm being transferred, he confirmed. Apparently, my methods are considered too lenient. Colonel Harrison arrives tomorrow. He led the massacre at Ash Creek. Eliza felt her heart sink. Ash Creek was infamous. Over 100 Apache, mostly women and children, slaughtered while under flag of truce. The peace talks, she began. I've sent my recommendations to Washington, emphasizing the progress we've made. But Harrison... Bradford shook his head. He believes the only good Indian is a dead Indian. His words, not mine. So we fought for nothing, Ayanna said bitterly. No. Bradford's voice carried surprising conviction. You've proven peace is possible. I've seen it. My men have seen it. That knowledge doesn't die with my transfer. He handed Eliza a sealed packet. My personal letters of recommendation, copies of our agreements, testimonials from traders and settlers who've benefited from the peace. Use them well. As they made camp that night, the weight of setback settled over the group. Some Apache representatives spoke of leaving, of warning their bands to flee deeper into Mexico. Running solves nothing, Karuk argued. We knew this would be difficult. Difficult is one thing, an older warrior retorted. Suicide is another. Harrison will come for us all. Eliza stood, her decision made. Then we don't wait for him to come. We go over his head, to Washington itself if necessary. The audacity of it silenced the group. An Apache delegation traveling to the nation's capital? It was unprecedented, dangerous, possibly mad. You would do this? Lozin asked quietly. I would do whatever it takes to protect the peace we've started building. To protect, she placed a hand on her belly, the future we're creating. Karuk stood beside her, his recovery complete, his presence a pillar of strength. My wife speaks wisdom. We have tried the warrior's path. It leads only to graves. Perhaps it is time for different kind of courage. The debate continued late into the night. But when dawn broke, the decision was made. A small delegation would travel east, Eliza and Karuk, Naichi for his wisdom, Lozin for her history, and 2 younger Apache who spoke English well. As they prepared for the unprecedented journey, Eliza felt the magnitude of what they attempted. They were David facing Goliath, armed only with truth and determination. Are you ready for this? Bradford asked as he saw them off, providing official papers that might offer some protection on their journey. I've been getting ready since the night I walked into that sandstorm, Eliza replied. The colonel studied her, this young woman who had chosen the hardest of all paths, and saluted. It was a gesture of respect between equals, and it brought tears to her eyes. As their small party rode east toward an uncertain future, Eliza felt the child quicken within her for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings, a promise of life continuing despite all odds. She reached for Karuk's hand, and together they faced the rising sun, ready to carry their fragile peace into the very heart of power that had tried so hard to destroy it. The train station in Kansas City overwhelmed the senses, iron and steam, the press of humanity, sounds and smells alien to those who knew only desert wind and pine smoke. Eliza watched her companions' faces as they navigated this strange new world, seeing wonder and wariness in equal measure. So many whites, Ayana murmured, unconsciously moving closer to the group. Stay together, Eliza advised. Acutely aware of the stares they drew, an obviously pregnant white woman traveling with Apache, including warriors in traditional dress. She'd insisted they wear their own clothing with pride. We're not here to pretend to be what we're not. The journey east had already tested them. In some towns, they'd been refused lodging until Eliza produced Bradford's papers. In others, crowds had gathered to gawk at the tame savages. Through it all, Karuk maintained his dignity, though she saw how his hand would drift to where his knife should be, finding only empty space since weapons had been forbidden on the train. In St. Louis, they were met by an unexpected ally, a journalist named Catherine Morse, who wrote for Eastern newspapers about Western affairs. She was sharp-eyed and direct, reminding Eliza of her late mother's suffragette friends. I've been following your story, Catherine said over tea in her modest hotel room. A white woman choosing Apache life, working for peace. It's captured imaginations back east. Some call you traitor, others saint. I'm neither, Eliza replied. Just a woman who fell in love with a good man and a different way of seeing the world. Catherine's articles proved invaluable, having already paved their way with sympathetic coverage. She'd arranged meetings with reform-minded politicians and activists who saw the Apache delegation as proof that peaceful coexistence was possible. But be warned, Catherine added. Harrison has friends in Washington, the Indian Ring, contractors and suppliers who profit from conflict. They won't welcome your message. Washington, D.C. rose before them like a fever dream of marble and ambition, buildings that dwarfed anything in the territories, streets choked with carriages, the very air thick with power and politics. Lozin, who had fought the United States Army for decades, stood very still as they approached the capital. So, this is the White Father's village, she said quietly. It explains much. Their first meeting was with Commissioner of Indian Affairs Thomas Morgan, a man whose reputation preceded him, a reformer who believed in civilizing the Indians through education and Christianity. His office was imposing, designed to intimidate, but Eliza had learned from Karuk that true power lay in stillness. Mrs. Morgan paused, uncertain how to address her. Karuk, she said firmly. In Apache tradition, I took my husband's name. I see. His expression suggested he didn't see at all. Well, Mrs. Kuruk, your petition has created quite a stir. An Apache delegation requesting formal peace treaties, trade agreements. It's highly irregular. So is peace, apparently. Nietzsche interjected, his dignity undiminished by his surroundings. We offer to walk new path. Will Washington walk with us? The meeting stretched for hours. Morgan questioned their sincerity, their authority to speak for other Apache, their ability to maintain peace. Through it all, Eliza translated not just words, but concepts, trying to bridge the chasm between worlds. What guarantee do we have that other bands will honor any agreement? Morgan pressed. What guarantee do we have that the army will? Kuruk countered. Trust must start somewhere, or it never starts. That evening, in their boarding house, one of the few that would accept them, Eliza fought waves of exhaustion. The child within her was active now, making rest difficult. Kuruk rubbed her back gently, humming an Apache lullaby. You push too hard, he said softly. We have so little time. Harrison is already at Fort McKenna. Every day we delay. Will not matter if you harm yourself or child. He turned her to face him. Remember what you taught me. Bridges are built stone by stone, not all at once. The next days brought a whirlwind of meetings. They spoke to congressmen, attended salons where Washington's elite gathered to see the noble savages and the white woman who loved one. Some encounters were hostile. One senator's wife asked Eliza how she could bear to be touched by a heathen, but others were surprisingly supportive. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, President Benjamin Harrison himself, perhaps influenced by his wife's interest in Indian welfare, agreed to meet them. The president's office was grand beyond imagination, but Eliza kept her father's words in mind. Power respects only power. Mr. President, she began, we come not as supplicants, but as representatives of a people who wish to live in peace. My husband's people have fought because they were given no choice. We offer another way. Harrison studied them over steepled fingers. And what of settlers who've lost family to Apache raids? What of soldiers killed in the line of duty? What of Apache families destroyed by soldiers? Lozen spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the weight of personal loss. What of children shot while sleeping? This wheel of vengeance turns both ways. President, we offer to break it. Tell me specifically what you propose. Harrison said. They laid out their plan, designated territories where Apache could live unmolested, trading posts for economic exchange, Apache scouts working with the military to prevent raids by hostile bands. It wasn't everything they wanted, but it was a beginning. And you, Mrs. Kuruk, the president addressed Eliza, you would live on these lands, raise your child among the Apache. I would raise my child to be a bridge, she replied, hand resting on her swollen belly, to understand both worlds and help them speak to each other. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'll consider your proposal. No promises, but I'll consider it. As they left the White House, Eliza felt a mixture of hope and trepidation. They'd planted seeds, but would they have time to grow? The answer came 3 days later in the form of a telegram. Colonel Harrison had launched a major offensive against Apache camps, claiming imminent threat. Several bands had fled to Mexico. Others were preparing to fight. The fragile peace was crumbling. We must return immediately, Kuruk said grimly. No. Eliza's voice held steel. That's what Harrison wants. For us to abandon diplomacy and return to war. We stay. We finish what we started. The next morning brought unexpected visitors to their boarding house. A delegation of Washington wives, led by the president's wife, Caroline, came calling. They were curious, condescending, but also potentially influential. My dear, Caroline Harrison said, studying Eliza's Apache dress with barely concealed fascination. You've created quite the sensation. Tell us, how does a properly educated young woman come to this? Eliza chose her words carefully. By learning that properly educated meant knowing only one way to see the world. My husband's people taught me that there are as many ways to live with honor as there are stars in the sky. But surely you miss civilization, another woman pressed. The comforts, the culture. I've found more civilization in an Apache camp than in many drawing rooms, Eliza replied. They share what they have, care for their elders, raise children with love and wisdom. What comfort compares to that? The visit ended with mixed results, but Caroline Harrison seemed thoughtful. 2 days later, word came that she'd spoken to her husband about the remarkable Apache woman and her eloquent white wife. The final meeting with President Harrison came as Eliza's pregnancy neared its term. She stood with difficulty but refused to show weakness. Too much depended on strength. I've reviewed your proposals, the president said, and I've received disturbing reports from Fort McKenna. Colonel Harrison claims the Apache are massing for war because he attacks peaceful camps. Karuk's control finally slipped. He creates the war he claims to prevent. Perhaps. The president's tone was non-committal. I'm willing to authorize a limited trial. 1 year, specific territories, strict conditions. If peace holds, we'll consider permanence. If violence erupts. We understand, Eliza said quickly, before anger could derail negotiation. We accept your terms. They left Washington with papers that might mean nothing or everything. Official recognition of Apache rights to specific lands. Trade agreements. Promises of protection. Whether Colonel Harrison would respect them remained to be seen. The journey home was arduous, Eliza's condition making travel difficult. They stopped frequently, and it was in a small Kansas town that the labor began. The local doctor refused to attend an Apache's wife, but a midwife with Cherokee blood came to their aid. Under a full moon, with Kuruk holding her hands and Lozen singing ancient birthing songs, Eliza brought their child into the world, a daughter with her mother's golden hair and her father's dark eyes, a living bridge between worlds. What will you name her? The midwife asked. Mika, Eliza said, the Apache word flowing easily now. It means intelligent raccoon, a creature that adapts, survives, thrives in any environment. May she need all those gifts, Lozen murmured, but her weathered face held a smile. They returned to Arizona to find chaos. Colonel Harrison had indeed attacked, but the Apache bands, forewarned by riders, had largely escaped. More importantly, word of the Washington agreements had spread. Some bands had already moved to the designated territories, choosing wary peace over certain war. The reunion in the sacred canyon was bittersweet. They had achieved much, but at great cost. Trust was fragile. Harrison still commanded the fort, and many on both sides preferred conflict to compromise. But we've begun, Naichi said as they gathered around the fire, baby Mika sleeping in her cradle board. And beginnings, like children, must be nurtured to grow strong. As stars emerged overhead, Eliza nursed her daughter and thought of all that had passed. From a frightened girl fleeing an arranged marriage to a woman who'd walked the halls of power advocating for peace. The journey seemed impossible in retrospect. Yet here she was, surrounded by family of choice, if not blood, holding hope made flesh in her arms. Will it be enough? She asked Kuruk quietly. It must be, he replied, drawing her close. For her sake, it must be. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the darkness. Somewhere in the night, a wolf called to its pack, and was answered. The sound no longer frightened Eliza. She understood now that it was simply family calling to family. Bridges of sound across the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Colonel Harrison would test their agreements. Settlers would violate boundaries. Some Apache would choose raiding over farming. The path of peace was narrow and treacherous, with cliffs on either side. But tonight, in this sacred place, a white woman and an Apache warrior held their mixed-blood daughter and dared to dream of a future where such love was not anomaly, but example, where bridges between peoples could be built not just of treaties and trade, but of understanding and respect. The flame they'd lit was small, easily extinguished by the winds of hatred and history. But as Eliza had learned from the desert itself, sometimes the smallest flames, carefully tended, could survive the fiercest storms and grow to warm the world. In the circle of her family's arms, with ancient stars as witness and new life as promise. Eliza Karuk closed her eyes and knew that whatever came next, the bridge they'd built with their bodies and hearts would stand. It had to. The alternative was darkness, and they had chosen light. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through the Wild West, where love conquered impossible odds and two souls from different worlds dared to build a bridge of hope. I'd love to hear where you're listening to this story from. Please share in the comments below. Whether you're driving through the Arizona desert, sitting in a cozy room in London, or anywhere in between, let's connect across the miles just as Eliza and Karuk connected across cultures. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more tales of courage, romance, and the untamed frontier. What did you think of Eliza and Karuk's story? Did their love move you as much as it moved me? Share your thoughts below. I read every comment and can't wait to hear from you.